I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Q&A. Tom, would you like to make an announcement before we get started?
Oh, I certainly would. I want to thank everybody and just remind you that this is actually your show. We're doing this for you. So thank everybody for sending in your excellent questions. And I've got a few people that have sent in a follow-up email saying, hey, I haven't heard back from you. So all I can say is if you send us a question, listen, just monitor the Bigfoot questions and answers, because we ask and answer questions there, and there can be a latency. A lot of times we have a lot of questions, and it just gets staggered with different episodes. So with that said, I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and if you want to become a strategic partner, I want to thank those who have. You can do so by going to patreon.com/Creek Devil. Or if you're watching us on YouTube, and I will mention that the shows get posted first on YouTube. So if you're looking for your question to be answered, maybe go there. If you're on YouTube, just go to the description, scroll down. It's right there. There's a link, and you can do it for as little as $1 a month or whatever you feel like, whatever you're comfortable doing. And if you don't have the money to do it, we're here for you anyway. Don't worry about it. That's what the show's all about.
Yeah, we get hit with a lot of information, both through 3 emails, text, phone calls, you name it. So sometimes things get kind of lost. They get piled on with other information. So if we didn't answer a question, hit us up again. Tom, what do we got today?
Okay, Rose wants to know, and she has a great question. I was wondering what you guys think of Star Wars, specifically Chewbacca, as resembling the Bigfoot, working with Han Solo as well as being his friend. And I'll just give you my opinion on that. I often wondered, I don't work for Lucasfilms or anything like that, but I wondered if that's what he was, if he was intended to be a kind of a Bigfoot type creature, a little bit emaciated, from the Bigfoots that I've seen. But anyway, those are my thoughts.
I've seen other people ask that question, and I can't remember if George Lucas actually answered it or not, but I think that's what it was intended to be.
I heard that a while back, and I heard in an interview that he had an encounter with one, and that Chewbacca was based on that.
That George Lucas had an encounter.
Yeah.
Well, it'd be interesting to know if he had.
Can I interject something?
Yeah.
Okay. I always wondered, and I had not heard that he'd had a Bigfoot encounter. I always wondered about that. But I think there's a lesson to be learned here, guys. We always hear people talk about the Patterson film being a man in a Bigfoot costume. Here we have a film by a man, that is renowned for his film.
Sorry,
film,
I got a phone behind me.
And I don't know whether you call it CGI in his films, but I guess that's what it was. But they had to use a man in a costume, and if I recall, the guy that did it was quite a enormous person. I mean, I think he was well over 7 feet, wasn't he? And was it you, David, that just said he looked like he was a little bit on the emaciated side? So, I mean, if you couldn't even get him bulked up for the Lucas films, how could somebody possibly have done that even years before that? I mean, how many years was that, the Patterson film before that, to have looked like what Hattie looked like in that film? to what we had in the Lucasfilm. The comparison between the two, where you actually have, that is in the Lucasfilm a man in a costume. So
Of course, that's an excellent observation because it totally validates the Patty film. It really does.
well, that's I guess my roundabout way of saying that.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was Peter. That was Peter Mayhew that played Chewbacca, and at the time, that Chewbacca suit was supposed to be the best Hollywood could offer.
Well, that was
Well,
in
there you go.
'67. That was, the Planet of the Apes. That was the state of the art technology in that time period.
Yep.
Well, I don't remember. I saw the first film, but heavens, my kids were little then. I don't even remember. It was back in the 70s, wasn't it? That late 70s that came out? Or was it the
68.
early
Yeah, it
80s?
was.
I don't remember when that film.
Planet of the Apes, I think,
Well,
was
No, no, no.
68.
Star Wars.
Oh, Star Wars, 77.
No, Star Wars.
77.
Star Wars.
Yeah, 77.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
Because
and
Milo and I saw
yeah,
it right
I
after
think,
boot camp. Remember that, Milo?
And then Patty, that film.
Yep, I do. The lines were forever.
Yeah.
What were you saying, Forrest?
No, I was just going to say, and I think the Patty film was either 67 or 68. I don't remember
60,
for sure.
October
So you've got a
67.
10-year. Okay, you've got a 10-year gap there for all the improvements in costuming, and you see a man in a costume there, and there's such a vast difference in what the real thing looks like versus this guy in a costume. And I mean,
Yeah,
I hate
big
to say it,
difference.
but it really did look like a man in a costume.
It did, yeah.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
Okay, Tom, what do we got next?
Okay. This is from our friend John, Professor John in the Southeast. We'll just leave it at that. But we're going to have him on soon once he gets some free time because he's having problems with these things. But he also has a question, a really good question. He says, "Hey, Tom, Will, and everybody, the gang at Creek Devil, I would love to hear the group's thoughts on Patty's movement being slow when compared to so many eyewitnesses' testimony about these creatures moving so quickly. I know there could be many explanations for this, but I'd like to hear y'all's thoughts."
Well, you guys
It'd be
know
y'all's thoughts.
You know my thoughts. I think personally now, based on what Bob Titmus found when he, tracked the creature 10 days after they filmed it, that it was moving in a way. To me, it was kind of suspicious because it turned and looked like it was making sure that they were still there, and almost like it was trying to draw them off into the direction it was going. And I asked Bob Gimlin years ago why they didn't follow it, and he said because we were afraid. We didn't know where the other two were because there were 3 creatures in the area, but Titmus only found evidence of the one creature.
I agree.
I want to. I just want to comment on that. Well, that is totally consistent with the behavior that you and I have experienced. Well, the team experienced twice here in Oregon. It was at nighttime, so we didn't see it, but we were being drawn into an ambush situation, and that
Right.
would be totally consistent with Patty.
Well, and the reason I say that, is because of the behavior of the creature, and again, how it moved at that speed, not super quick, that we hear so often. Now, the fact that Titmus didn't find tracks of the other 2 creatures, which had been seen in that area previous to that time, just a couple of months prior to that, that's how they knew the creatures were in the area at that particular time, was because loggers found 3 sets of tracks on a road. But now the creatures are pretty smart. They may not have gone to that particular area to leave footprints, so that the humans wouldn't be aware of the creature's presence. In fact, they hadn't seen anything for 3 weeks leading up to that event. And then all of a sudden they rode the horses up the creek. They come around the bend. There was the creature standing there. Why was it standing there? It would have obviously heard the horses coming, and people might say, "Oh, well, the noise of the creek." Well, people that say that aren't familiar with Bluff Creek in that particular area. It's 7 miles from the mouth up to that point. The creek is about 13 miles long. So you're up towards the headwaters, and by October, the water level is very, very low. There's hardly any water up there at that point. That area gets very hot.
It's practically dry.
Yeah, that area gets very hot in the summer. The bodies of water dry up, or at least mostly dry up, and there's not a whole lot. So, I mean, the argument, the creek was loud there, it wouldn't have heard the horses. That's not the case at all. It would have very clearly heard the horses coming. So why did it just stand there like it was waiting for them? And then it turns, instead of going off into the brush, it could have turned to its left, gone off into the brush, been out of sight in a couple of moments. They would have never gotten film. Instead, it goes across an open area, across the creek, and up the creek through that whole open area where they were able to film it for some time. And then as Titmus found, it went on that direction, and then it actually concealed itself in a location with some ferns and some other brush where it could see the men, and apparently it stayed there for some time watching them. It's just very suspicious behavior to me.
Let me back up the truck for a second. I got a question. How did Gimlin and Patterson know that there were two other creatures there?
Well, because of the report. Now, the initial report happened in August. There were some loggers that came out of their work area heading towards their vehicles, and they found 3 sets of tracks on the road. That information got to Al Hodgson. Al Hodgson called Green. Green and Dehennon flew down there. By the time they got there, it rained. The tracks weren't very good, so they went back to British Columbia. After they left, Hodgson called Roger Patterson's house. Patterson and Gimlin were at Mount St. Helens, but he talked to his wife, Mrs. Patterson, and said, hey, there's 3 sets of tracks here. Roger should get down here if he wants to see these. So as soon as he got back, she told the 2 men. They threw all their gear into the truck and took off down there. That's how they knew there were 3 creatures in the area.
Well, I was just going to say that, now John said that he thought she was moving slowly. I don't think that she was moving slowly. She wasn't running, but she was definitely moving with purpose, and she knew exactly where she was headed, and she turned around and looked to see where they were at, and of course, theoretically, I guess we really have no proof that she was trying to lead them into a situation that would have been disastrous for both of those men, but
right.
We can only assume that this was happening. But we know how Bigfoot are,
and it didn't seem to move.
But she was definitely
it didn't seem to be too concerned about their presence.
She was definitely moving with a purpose.
But not too concerned about them. Yeah,
she was moving. No, she was not in the least bit concerned about them, and it was almost like she was checking to make see what. She turned when, and even Gimlin made the comment that when he pulled up his horse, he had moved up forward of Patterson, and he pulled his horse up and around, and that was when he actually drew his rifle out of the scabbard and was prepared, only if she, act aggressively, but she never did. She just turned, and it was like she was checking their positions, and I think when I mean, this is my own opinion, and, for what it's worth, she noted that neither of the men were moving, so therefore she just moved off with a purpose. She knew where she was going, and she really was very unconcerned about where they were. As long as they weren't moving, she was just going to, walk off at a fast clip.
Yeah, it's obvious that the creature was not afraid of them. And Gimlin told me, he was actually closer to the creature than Patterson was. In fact, he told me that he could actually see its lips and its tongue and teeth and things like that. So, those are details that aren't out there too often. I mean, I know Bob has talked about it, I'm sure, but that's what he told me. So, I guess any other comments from everybody on the panel on that, or should we move on?
Well,
whenever they were measuring Patty's tracks after she left, didn't they find 2 more sets of fresh tracks?
No.
They didn't? Okay.
Just that one line of prints.
Well, here's an interesting thought. that was kind of the beginning of the whole people going out and actually trying to find one of these creatures to prove their existence.
Right.
So, in a sense, this was sort of, I don't want to say first contact, but it was kind of that in a sense of people going out and looking for, and they found what they were looking for. This is where a lot of people, the so-called skeptics, have a problem. Well, you found what you were looking for. Okay, well, yeah, they did. But this was kind of the very beginning of the whole thing of going out and finding a creature.
Well, that's what really got people's attention on a bigger scale, because prior to that, people like Renee Dehinden and John Green and Bob Titmus, those folks, and there was only not very many of them really, had spent more than a decade looking. And prior to Renee Dehinden actually taking an interest in seeing if there was something real to go look for, nobody cared. I mean, there was no interest in it.
Yeah, I think the only eyewitness reports were the accidental ones, where you just have a kind of a fortuitous, somebody saw one and that was the end of that. But I don't know if people were actually going out looking for these things.
No, they weren't. It might get in a newspaper, but beyond that, nobody was looking. Nobody was interested. All right, let's move on to the next question.
Okay. Brian wants to know a question: when you're out in the woods, whether you're hunting or doing research, what caliber of sidearm do you recommend carry and why?
Well, that's a good question. Nobody really knows what
20
would
mil?
take one down, and shooting at one is not something I would recommend doing. For a number of reasons.
No,
I mean, the
not
muscle
at
and
all.
bone density is very high, much higher than ours. So bullets are going to have much less effect on the creatures. Then you're going to tick it off, and not just that individual you shoot at, but the rest of the group. And you don't know how big the group is.
And how many accounts have we heard time and time and time and time again where I had a 30-06, which is a pretty potent weapon. I shot it in the chest, 40 yards away. You could hear it hit the creature, and it didn't kill it. It didn't even knock it down.
Yeah.
So there you go. Okay, next question, unless somebody wants to follow up on that. Paul in Knoxville wants to know, this kind of dovetails into that. Okay, what if you're in a situation where you need a non-lethal response should you find yourself in an encounter to save yourself and not become a sack lunch? Would firecrackers suffice, such as an M80, air horn, Reese's Pieces, and I'm going to throw in one other thing, which is my favorite deterrent, which is an extremely high lumen flashlight if it's nighttime.
Yeah, the flashlight. One of the things I was told, of course, the air horn is one of the methods that we haven't talked to people a whole bunch. I mean, privately, but that's one of them. That's a definite one to use. One of the things that Gerald used very successfully was talking out loud, like you were talking to other people that weren't seen. That's something that'll throw the creatures off. It does, and it works every time.
Well, that and not going into the woods by yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's number one. Don't go alone.
Yeah.
And it's
not
just,
only for Bigfoot.
Right. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, you can get in trouble, especially here in the north or on the West Coast, I should say. What do they say? A 4-foot fall in the woods is lethal because you can break a femur, tibia, sprain an ankle, and that's it. You're done.
Just offer him a tomahawk sirloin.
What's that, Forrest?
What's that, Forrest?
I said just offer him a big tomahawk sirloin, and you'll be okay.
Right.
Not the Reese's Pieces?
No, I wouldn't go with the Reese's Pieces. No, that's not enough.
I like them, though.
Well, you just can't have one. You just can't have just one.
Oh, that's Lay's potato chips.
Well, that's all of it.
But now, wait a minute. Now, Milo, would that work? Would that work with going with somebody else in the woods, though? You can't just have one.
Yeah, you gotta have people slower than you. Jesus.
Well, just make sure you trip your partner.
I will. They're going to be.
No worries.
He who shall not be named will be number one, because I know I can outrun that.
Okay, let's move on.
One of the things that I carry when I go out is I have a green laser, and I've never had to use it, but I've been told that works pretty well too.
Tom,
they light fires too. I got one.
Tom, weren't we told something about? Weren't we told something about that, Tom? The different colors.
Yeah, we were.
We can't mention. We can't mention who, know. But yeah. And what was? You remember what it was he said about that?
Yeah, I thought that the red lasers were ineffective, and the green lasers. I may have it exactly the opposite. It's been years, but the green lasers were more effective than the red ones. I'm going to stick with 1,000 to 3,000 lumen flashlight. Thank you.
There you go.
And I'll tape a green laser onto the top of it. I'll leave no stone unturned.
A little safety there.
Absolutely.
I would like to add, take whatever you need. Whatever makes you feel safe out there. I mean, that's one thing. But to go out there with nothing, that's just foolhardy.
Take a dog, too. Early warning.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I can go for the dog while you're running.
Irish Wolfhound. Man, they both set each other up. The Chihuahua has a bigger bark, but he just light on his feet. He can smell a mouse fart and he's barking.
Those Chihuahuas are fast, so Sasquatch might have a hard time grabbing it. All right, are we ready for the next one?
Oh yeah,
we're ready.
Okay. Hi, everyone. We know Bigfoot will go down on all fours. This is from Jim and Sharon, and they had asked this a while back, and I guess they wanted to make sure that we got the message, so here we go. Okay, if Bigfoot will go down on all fours, with that said, when they do that, is their run action on all fours different than those of a bear? Bears kind of lope along, they sure do, butt moving up and down. Do Bigfoots do the same, or is it more of a smooth action?
Forrest, what do you think?
Well, I think I may be wrong, but I think we've kind of answered this one before. But you can watch chimpanzees run on all fours, and they are quite quick. They have a galloping motion, and it's similar to bears, but I don't know. There's just something about a bear. Bears just seem so clumsy. But, when you're running from one, they don't seem so clumsy. But, when you're the one that they're chasing. So, but we hear all the time that Bigfoot, when people see Bigfoot on all fours, that they're quick. And chimpanzees are. Now, gorillas, not so much. You very, very rarely see a gorilla. And that they're more comparable as far as size to a Bigfoot, but they don't. You know what? I don't ever recall ever seeing a gorilla run.
Do you think that's more?
I've seen plenty of chimpanzees running. They're quick.
Do you think that's more a function of structure or size?
I think it's fun. I think it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of both. Bigfoot, we hear that they have shorter legs. They're not long. They're longer legged, of course, than chimpanzees and gorillas, but they're not long legged like us. We're more. Our legs and arms are more, spatially correct. And lengthwise, but we don't find that with Bigfoot. We hear that they're longer armed, and they'd have to be quadrupedal to go down and run smoothly.
Yeah,
but you never heard people say that they weren't smooth when they run.
And the lower.
I've never heard somebody say that they were cumbersome.
Yeah, the lower part of the leg is shorter than the upper part of the leg, so it's not.
Yeah.
Where ours are kind of almost even, like our lower leg is kind of the same length as our thigh, basically.
Will, we had somebody that you and I have spoken with. She hasn't been on the show, and I don't believe she ever will be. But she's a professional who works in the forest industry, and she saw one in Washington, southern Washington. You know what I'm talking about.
Right.
It ran across the road on all fours, and her first thought was bear, and then it stood up on two legs.
It was silhouetted,
as it walked. Yeah, and it walked up a slope on two legs, and she yelled, "That's a man," or looks like a man, or something to that effect. So, and my neighbor, one of my neighbors, we had him on one of the very, very early episodes of Creek Devil. He didn't know until actually we were recording that episode. One of the guests on there talked about seeing one on all fours. He goes, "I had no idea they could be on all fours." He said, a couple of years after we recorded that, I saw the ugliest, and I'll just leave the rest of the verbiage out, elk walk across the road, and this is in Central Oregon, and a couple hundred yards away. He goes, "That was the ugliest elk I'd ever seen," and it was like perfectly flat, vertical, like a board was on its back as it crossed the road. So I don't know, for what it's worth, there we go.
What do you guys
their
think?
body structure is going to make them very fluid going up or down from all fours.
Yeah, it's an interesting aspect of something we don't have a huge amount of information on yet, but as we get more, we'll come out with that. What do we got next time? We get time for one more question.
Okay. This question has to do with how do we think Bigfoot deals with poisonous snakes in the wilderness? This is also by Brian, and it's a question that's been asked frequently, and that's okay. We will answer it frequently as well. And I think that would apply to, not only poisonous snakes, but, yellow jackets and all the other little bitey things that are in the forest.
I don't know. What do you guys think?
Do we have any thoughts on this?
Well, if it's a snake, looking at how the Sasquatch is structured, being so thick, I think a snake bite is going to basically be the equivalent of a dry bite.
Yeah, that could be, because they do have that bone and muscle structure density that's, 10 to 12 times what ours is. So the snake could be well advised not to just leave Sasquatch alone unless Sasquatch inadvertently stepped on it, at which point that'd be the last thing this snake ever felt, I thought.
Yep.
Well, actually, I think the fact that snake venom has a necrotic effect, it usually rots the area around the bite mark. I don't think that the density of the flesh, it might prohibit the snake from getting a good bite in there, but I think the hair would be more of a preventative than even the muscle density of the animal.
Well, I can tell you the first two that I saw, the hair was really thick. I was just thinking that very thing, Forrest, that, for a snake to bite one in the leg, I don't think they'd actually get to the skin.
Yeah, they've got to go through that. So, I mean, if a snake was able to get a good bite in on them, it would probably have the same effect. And, of course, snakes dispense venom in varying amounts, too. They don't, it's just like humans being bitten by a snake. I mean, sometimes they're fatal, sometimes they're not. So, but they always have a necrotic effect on the skin area that they bite in, so, which is sometimes not real good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's all around bad. The rattlesnakes actually have some of the worst venom out there, especially the eastern diamondbacks are just, you can get all the anti-venom in the world, and I've read accounts where people have been bitten by them. They got the best treatment in the world, and they still died because it's just that nasty. It's a very complex cocktail of venom.
Yeah, it's something I'm sure they, of course, having lived out there for eons, are pretty adept at dealing with. So, but I'm sure occasionally they have bad encounters, but for the most part, apparently they do okay.
And think about it. It's their backyard. It's their environment. If anything would know where to avoid a snake bite, then these things probably do, whereas humans are probably considerably less likely to instinctually know where and I've heard that most snake bites on people is actually in their arms, not their legs. Because you're reaching for firewood, you're reaching around a log, you're bending over to pick something up,
right?
And you startle one of these things.
Yep, that's very true. All right, guys, well, listen, we are out of time. Thanks for the questions, folks, and keep sending them in to us. So having said that, we're going to wrap this up and join us next time for the Q&A.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning, @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out there.